All right, for today's video, we are starting our new unit, and we are going to start by talking about linear relationships. So our learning target is I can create tables and graphs for linear relationships. Please write down the date that you're watching this. As always, that just helps you keep your own notes organized. Write down what you already know about this. So you may not know what I mean by a linear relationship, but you know what a table is, you know what a graph is. So you do know a lot about things already. Then we come on to vocabulary. So we have several vocabulary words here. The first one is relation. A relation is a set of ordered pairs that relates an input and an output. So this is going to be a major topic for us this week, this unit, is we're talking about relationships, comparing an input and an output, and we're going to see more about what that means later. Next is linear. Linear is an ordered pair of inputs and outputs that form a straight line. So if you think about a graph, any graph that is a straight line, that's linear. And if it curves or has corners or other crazy things, then that would not be linear. So linear just means straight line. A function is any relation where each input has exactly one output. So this is something we talked about in 6th grade quite a bit, and so hopefully you have a little bit of basis in that. But even if you don't, all it means is that when I put something into this, I can only get one answer out. A domain is all the possible inputs, so everything I could possibly input, and then the range is all the possible outputs. Domain and range aren't going to be huge factor in our unit here, but they are really good words to use. In math, we don't use input and output, we use domain and range. So I'm going to try to use both of those words during our videos here as well. So pause the video here, get all that written down, and then continue when you're ready. So we're going to start by talking about how we represent a function, how we represent a linear relationship. Our functions here are going to be linear relationships. They're not always, but for today, for this unit, our functions are going to be linear relationships. So in this case, we have several ways of describing a linear relationship or a function. And the first one is the verbal rule. The verbal rule describes what's happening. So in this case, it says the output is 3 more than the input. So whatever I put in to this function, the output will be 3 more than that. If that's my verbal rule, then my y represents my output equals my input x plus 3. So I'm going to put in an x, I'm going to add 3 to it, and that's going to get me my y. So the next way I can present this is in a table. So if I have a table and I put for this function where whatever my x is, I add 3 to get my y. Well, if I have 0 for my x, to figure out what y would be, I would just put in 0 plus 3. That's 3. And I can keep doing that. So whatever is in my x, all I'm going to do is add 3 each time, and that's going to get me my output. So 1 plus 3 is 4, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 3 is 6, 4 plus 3 is 7. I don't even need these anymore. Okay? Now, the next way we can represent this is with our ordered pairs. You saw me talking about ordered pairs in a couple places in the vocabulary. Our ordered pairs are just putting the x and y and putting it into a format like this, where we can graph it. So I'm just going to take each row of the table one at a time, and that's going to be my ordered pairs. So my first row, my x is 0 and my y is 3. So my ordered pair is 0, 3. My next row is 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, 6, and 4, 7. Now I can take all of these things and I can put them on a graph. So 0, 3, remember that this is my x-axis, this is my y-axis. So here, in my last way to represent my linear relationship, my function, I'm just plotting these. So 0, 3 will be over 0 and up 3. 1, 4 is over 1, up 4. 2, 5, 3, 6, and 4, 7. Now, there we go. Now, I can draw a line through it to show that we could keep putting points in here. We could keep doing that forever. We're not going to because that would take too much work. So this is how we represent a function or linear relationship. We have a verbal rule, equations, tables, ordered pairs, and graphs. So that's what we're going to be practicing a little bit today. So our next example here is with a little bit more complicated of an equation. So let's say we have the equation y equals 2x minus 1. If I want to fill out my graph, there's 3 steps. The first step is I'm going to make a table. So for each of these x values in the table, I'm going to plug them into my formula. Y equals 2x minus 1, that's my equation. And I'm going to start by filling out this table here. So if x is negative 2, if x is negative 2, then y is 2 times negative 2 minus 1. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 minus 1 is negative 5. Okay? Now we can continue in doing this for each step. If x is negative 1, we do 2 times negative 1 minus 1. Each time I'm just taking my x and I'm plugging it in for the x in this equation here. So 2 times negative 1 is negative 2 minus 1, that's negative 3. Now I can plug in 0. Times 0 minus 1. 2 times 0 is 0. Minus 1 is negative 1. Now do 1. 2 times 1 minus 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Minus 1, that's 1. And finally, plugging in 2 for x in my equation. 2 times 2 minus 1. 2 times 2 is 4. Minus 1 is 3. My next step is to take each of these in the table and graph them as ordered pairs. So each of my ordered pairs goes like this. Remember that the x always comes first. So my first ordered pair is negative 2, negative 5. Then I have negative 1, negative 3. Then 0, negative 1, 1, 1, and 2, 3. Finally, I can take each of these and I can plot them. Starting with negative 2, negative 5. Negative 2, negative 5 means I go over to the negative 2 on the x, and then I go down 5, which gives me my point right there. Negative 1, negative 3, 0, negative 1, 1, and 2, 3. And again, I can connect it with a line to show that we could keep going and plotting more points. As we can see, this is a linear function. This is a linear relationship. It is a straight line. Okay? For the next one, using the graph of an equation, you're taking music lessons. The book for the lesson costs $15. You are charged $7.50 per lesson. Let C represent the total cost and N represent the number of lessons. So in this case, we aren't given the equation. we have to first come up with the equation, and we're given this word problem. So the book for the lesson costs $15, and you're charged $7.50 per lesson. So C represents the total cost, and N represents the number of lessons. So the total cost, that's what I want it to equal. So I'm going to have C equals something else. Now I have to think about what is my cost. The book costs $15, and it's $7.50 per lesson. Well, N represents number of lessons. $7.50 per lesson means I have to multiply that. So that's going to be $7.50 times the number of lessons, adding that 15. That's how I write my equation. Now that I've written my equation, I can make a table for the solutions. So all we're going to do is we're going to take each of these n's and we're going to plug it in for n there. So for n is 0, I would do 750 times 0 plus 15. 750 times 0 is 0, plus 15 gives me 15. Okay, now I need to figure out what would happen if I have 2 lessons. In that case, I would do 750 times 2 plus 15. 750 times 2, I can do on my calculator, that gets me 15. 15 plus 15 is 30. Remember, you can always use your calculator to help you on these. Just be really, really careful and make sure you're doing order of operations correctly. Now we can put in 4. So 750 times 4 plus 15. Well, 750 times 4 is 30, plus 15 is 45. And then lastly, we'll do 750 times 6 plus 15. 750 times 6 is 45. Again, you can do that on your calculator. And 45 plus 15 . After I've filled out my table, my next step is ordered pairs so that I can make my graph. So my ordered pairs are each of these here. And I like to write them out so I don't end up confused. So my first one is 0, 15, 2, 30, 4, 45, and 6, 60. Now we can graph these. N is on my x-axis and C is on my y-axis. So my first point is 0, 15. So over 0, up to the 15. Then over 2, up to the 3. Over 4, up to the 45. And over 6, up to the 60. And looking at this looks pretty much like a straight line to me. So I can again draw my straight line, and that will be my linear relationship. So your assignments for this section are going to be practicing with equations and graphs and tables and all that. Make sure you do the practices and try to get to at least 80 on them so that you really understand the stuff before we move on to making it more complicated. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks so much. Have a great day.